What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie Civil War. Here's a quick synopsis. In a dystopian America, a civil war has broken out, and a group of journalists attempt to journey to D.C. to take photos and interview the president. The film stars Kirsten Dunst, Kaylee Spaney, Wagner Moura, Stephen McKinley Henderson, Nick Offerman, and Jesse Plemons. Standout performances. For whatever reason, with certain actors, you only think about a certain point in their careers, and that feels like that's the case for Kirsten Dunst. We all look back fondly at the early part of her career when she was starring in Interview with a Vampire, Jumanji, Little Women, Small Soldiers, The Virgin Suicides, Bring It On, the Spider-Man movies, Wimbledon, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and Marie Antoinette. And it feels like no matter what Dunst does, that will remain the case. But outside of that period, she's done the best work of her career in Lars von Trier's Melancholia, Jeff Nichols' Midnight Special, Theodore Melfi's Hidden Figures, Sofia Coppola's The Beguiled, Jane Campion's The Power of the Dog, for which she received her first ever Oscar nomination. And I feel like the big difference is the beginning parts of her career was more mainstream. I mean, we all watched the Spider-Man movies. Everyone was seeing those movies. There's been a bunch of movies in a row that she's been in that not a lot of people have seen. I don't know how many people have seen The Beguiled. I know The Power of the Dog was an Oscar contender, but how many people actually saw that movie in its entirety on Netflix? The first half of her career was filled with box office success story after box office success story, and now the second part of her career is all critical acclaim. Civil War, she's seeing both things. In it, Dunst plays photojournalist Lee Smith, who has had a lot of success when she was younger and is now a bit jaded. For me, this is the best leading performance of Dunst's career. It was a reminder that she's a real deal movie star. It's a really good, subtle performance, and that is not something I saw a lot in her early career. She was more of a showy performer. Dunst in Civil War is paired with young actress Kaylee Spaney, who, like Dunst, has become a star in part by working with Sofia Coppola. I think over time we are going to realize how insane it was that Spaney did not get an Oscar nomination for her portrayal of Priscilla Presley in Priscilla. In Civil War, Spaney plays Jamie, who is aspiring to have a similar career to Dunst's Lee. And even though they are very different movies, I see similarities in Spaney's performances in both Priscilla and in Civil War. In both films, she starts out as a naive character, and then by the end she becomes a confident person. And what I'm most impressed by is the fact that in both films, she has a believable transformation. That is a special quality that movie stars have. They have you believe in the arcs of their character. Their characters go from point A to point B, but a lot of them aren't believable. Kaylee Spaney has you believing that her characters are changing from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. I know that's something that most movie stars should have, but a lot of them don't, and Kaylee Spaney is that rare actor that has you believing in her character's transformations. I really do believe that Spaney is going to be a movie star, and her next film is a real test because she is going to be the lead of the next movie of the Alien franchise, Alien Romulus, which could propel her to movie star status if successful. Dunst and Spaney are both great in Civil War, but the most talked about performance in this movie comes from Jesse Plemons, who is only in one scene, which I don't want to spoil. People are calling Plemons the new Philip Seymour Hoffman. I've said this before, I think he's more like Robert Duvall, who even when he's not the lead of a movie, makes a real impact. Plemons is a haunting presence in Civil War. Do you remember when everyone was making a big deal about the fact that Jesse Plemons was going to be the lead of the movie Killers of the Flower Moon, directed by Martin Scorsese? How ironic that it's his performance in Civil War that's getting giving him acclaim. His scene in Civil War will be looked back upon as one of the best of the year. Let's talk about the writer-director of Civil War, Alex Garland, who I believe is one of the best writer-directors working today. Ex Machina is one of my favorite sci-fis. Annihilation has become a hidden gem, and Men is one of the most ambitious horror films I've ever seen. And Civil War has everything I love about Garland. Like all of his films, visually it's stunning. One thing that doesn't get talked about enough when it comes to Alex Garland is the great performances he gets from actresses. Alicia Vikander in Ex Machina, that's the performance for which she should have won her Oscar for. Annihilation features one of the best performances of Natalie Portman's career. Jessie Buckley is great in Men, and as I said earlier, Kirsten Dunst gives the best leading performance of her career. It got me thinking about other actresses I would love to see work with Garland: Emma Stone, Jennifer Lawrence, and Amy Adams. I think those are 3 of the best actresses I've ever seen, and I would love for Alex Garland to get to work with them. I just think he gets amazing performances from actresses. Altogether, I just think he's one of the best directors working today, and the most talked about aspect on the Civil War press tour has been Alex Garland talking about how he doesn't want to direct movies anymore, telling The Guardian, quote, "I'm not planning to direct again in the foreseeable future." Garland has responded strongly to the idea that he is retiring from filmmaking, telling IndieWire, quote, "What I said is I'm going to take a break from directing for the foreseeable future." How that could get extrapolated as what pride I do or do not feel in this movie, I just don't see the connecting thread. I said I'm going to stop directing for the foreseeable future. Why would a statement like that be taken and picked over or interpreted to that degree? There's something weird happening there. There's something strange about that. It's a general strangeness that exists to do with what form public statements take, how they are used, and how words are interpreted or read. I also said what I'm going to do is screenwriting. Screenwriting is filmmaking. You can't erase screenwriters or DOPs or editors or actors from the process of screenwriting. Filmmaking is not the preserve solely of directors. Garland is next going to co-direct the movie Warfare, starring Charles Melton, Joseph Quinn, Will Poulter, and Noah Centineo, and is working on the sequel to 28 Days Later, which will see Danny Boyle come back to direct, and hopefully Cillian Murphy will star. As of now, Jodie Comer, Ray Fiennes, and Aaron Taylor Johnson have been cast. Civil War is without a doubt the most divisive movies of 2024, and it's all about the politics or lack thereof. A lot of people wanted the film to go deeper into why America is in a civil war, and I just don't agree with that take. The politics are just a launching point for the film, not what it's about. For me, what the movie is about is how there are no winners when you are fighting against each other, and how at some point you lose track of who you are fighting against and what exactly you are fighting for. The movie also has some complicated thoughts on journalists altogether and how far they are willing to go to get a photo or an interview. It's just about how some journalists are in it for the thrill seeking, like Wagner Moura's character Joel, and at one point Spaney's Jessie says she's never felt more alive, and the movie is asking the question, is that a good thing? I also think what Alex Garland is asking is journalism a noble profession anymore? Is it having any real world impact? Another thing I love about Alex Garland as a writer-director is the endings of his movies. They are so memorable. They are so shocking. Every single one of his movies has an ending that is going to blow your mind. The first time you see the ending to the movie Ex Machina is one of the best experiences you'll ever have seeing an ending to a movie. And then there's the crazy, bizarre ending to Annihilation, which I loved. Men had a crazy ending, and this film too has a great ending, which I will not spoil. Something that Alex Garland said on the Big Picture podcast on The Ringer that I found really fascinating is how the endings of his films virtually have no dialogue. And it's so true, and I think it's the thing that makes his endings so spectacular. There's no talking at the end of Ex Machina. There's no talking at the end of Annihilation. And there's really no talking at the end of Civil War and Men. And what that does is it makes the ending feel different than the rest of the movie. It makes those endings of those films feel memorable, and it's a visceral experience to watch Alex Garland end a movie. The endings of his films will have you thinking about the movies for days, weeks, maybe years later, and that's the point of movies, is to be memorable. Box office. Civil War is the most expensive movie to date from A24, the independent movie company, and the movie had the biggest opening weekend ever for an A24 film, making over $25 million. It's a movie with a star and a topic that people want to talk about, and I think its popularity will continue. People are going to recommend it to others because they want to have debates about this movie. They want to talk about the Jesse Plemons scene. They want to talk about Kirsten Dunst's performance, and they want to talk about Kaylee Spaney's performance. Oscar chances. It's early in the year, but by the end of the year, Alex Garland should definitely be in the Best Original Screenplay conversation. He was nominated once before for Ex Machina. I think he's one of, if not the best screenwriter working today. Let's get this guy another nomination for this brilliant screenplay. I also believe it's time for him to get a nomination for Best Director. I think his 4 movies are terrific. Again, I think he's one of the best writer-directors. I think he's given more credit for his screenplays than for his directions, but all of his movies look fantastic. Like I said earlier, he gets great performances from actresses. He nails the endings to all of his movies. Alex Garland should definitely be in the conversation for Best Director. I don't know if 5 better directors are going to make 5 better movies. I don't know the answer to that, but as of now, Alex Garland is at the top of my list of the best directorial efforts of the year, and I think he should be in the conversation by the end of the year. I 100% believe that Kirsten Dunst should get a Best Leading Actress performance for her work in Civil War. I think she carries the movie. I think her subtlety is brilliant in the film. Do I think by the end of the year that Kirsten Dunst is going to get nominated for Civil War? Absolutely not. It's not the type of performance that gets an Oscar nomination, but I would love to see it, and I think it's more than deserving. The other performance from this movie that I think deserves an Oscar nomination comes from Jesse Plemons. Yes, it's one scene in a movie, but it's a true supporting performance. We've gotten to a point where leading performances are nominated for Best Supporting Actor or Actress. I think it's time that the Academy gets back to recognizing supporting performances, and you're not going to find 5 better supporting performances than Jesse Plemons in Civil War. I don't care about screen time. What he does in this movie is an acting masterclass. And finally, I don't care what other movies come out this year. Civil War should get a nomination for Best Picture. I will not believe that 10 better movies will come out in the year 2024. One of the things I was most impressed with Civil War was the balancing of the tones. Yes, there is real dramatic elements in this movie. There's some real scary scenes. The Jesse Plemons scene is the scene that's getting the most talked about, but there are other moments in the movie that are shocking. And there's also a weird sense of humor in the movie as well. And I hate to use this word, but I believe that Alex Garland was trying to make the situation in this movie feel authentic and as real as possible, and I think he does a great job at achieving that. Like, it's not that hard to imagine that this is how we would also react if a real civil war was going on, and that's where the horror element comes into play. I think people are scared of this movie because of how real it feels. One of the scenes of the movie is when the characters go to a place in the country that is basically pretending that a civil war is not going on. And that is how I believe that some parts of America would react if there was a civil war going on today. They would ignore it completely. Kirsten Dunst's character, Lee, and Spaney's Jamie talk about the fact that their parents act like a war is not going on. That really hit home for me because I do believe there are people out there that would not act like a war was going on if a civil war did break out in America today. But if you look at the movie deeper, I think it's also asking the question is Lee's and Jamie's involvement in the war a good thing at all? I interpret what Alex Garland is saying with this movie is that he believes the journalists give themselves too much credit. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I see it, and that's what I think is so fascinating about this movie is that other people are going to get different things from the movie than me. And that's a good thing. We shouldn't all have the same reading of a movie. Movies should have different interpretations. That's what makes them interesting. I also just love the fact that the movie has become popular enough that we could have this kind of discussion surrounding the movie, that there's real talk about this movie. It is a rare thing that a non-action flick, a non-zombie movie, a non-superhero movie, non-sci-fi movie gets in the zeitgeist like this. One of the biggest complaints I hear about movies all of the time is that they are not set in modern day. Well, this movie is basically set in modern times, and it is talking about modern problems. And that's why people are scared by it. That's why people are blown away by it. That's why people are relating to it, because it is speaking to us as a society today. It's not talking about the past. It's not talking about the future. It's putting the mirror right up to us and talking about the here and now, and not enough movies are doing that. And that's why this movie is getting talked about more than most movies nowadays. And when people watch the movie, they have strong reactions. Like, I'm having a strong reaction to this movie. I believe it is a near masterpiece. I think it does everything it sets out to do. I think Alex Garland is a genius. It's super well made, and the performances are great. Say what you will about Alex Garland, but I believe that he is a filmmaker who knows how to tackle hot button issues, and this movie is a perfect example of that. The reason that so many people are having different interpretations about the movie is because Alex Garland as a writer-director is not telling you how to feel about the movie. He's not telling you how to feel about the Civil War. He's not telling you how to feel about the journalist. He is just showing you and letting you interpret what's on the screen, and that's what I think the best writer-directors do. They don't force you to feel something. He's not trying to get you to feel sad, happy, scared, confused. Maybe you're feeling all of that watching this movie. I certainly was, but he's not forcing an idea down your throat. He's letting you interpret the material. After his second movie, Annihilation, didn't make a lot of money, my fear was that Alex Garland would become like a filmmaker who makes really good movies that no one talks about. I felt like not enough people talked about Annihilation. I felt like not enough people talked about Men. And then he made that TV show Devs, which is really good. I recently watched some of it, and it's brilliant, and not enough people talked about that. So coming into Civil War, I had no idea that he was going to make a movie that a lot of people were going to talk about. But thankfully, that's been the case. I've been a fan of this guy since Ex Machina. I believe he's one of the 10 best directors working today. He might be my favorite writer-director besides Christopher Nolan, and a lot of screenwriters become directors, and you just wish that they went back to screenwriting because the directors that they worked with are far better directors. That's not the case with Alex Garland. I think he's also one of the best directors working today, and Civil War is right up there with his other really good movies. I would put it in line with Ex Machina and Annihilation. And if Civil War is the first movie of Alex Garland's you've seen, you should definitely go back and watch Ex Machina, Annihilation, Men, and the TV show Devs. Civil War is an example of why directors and writers should be given a decent budget to make the movies they want to make. Yes, don't give them an infinite amount of budget, but give Alex Garland $55 million or whatever Civil War cost to make, and you're going to get a brilliant movie out of it that a lot of people are going to be talking about. And that's what happened with Civil War. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I highly recommend you check out Alex Garland's Civil War. Next week on the podcast, I'm talking about Guy Ritchie's The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, starring Henry Cavill and Isa Gonzalez. So tune into that, and please rate, review, and subscribe.